Hi, I'm Celeste, and my husband waited until the moment our daughter tossed her graduation cap in the air to tell me he was leaving me. He did it with a whisper, just one breath behind my ear, one sentence that unraveled 20 years of marriage like it was nothing more than thread. I'm leaving you. I've been seeing someone. Let's not ruin Lena's day. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a smile for the camera as he stood beside me and wrapped his arm loosely around my shoulder for the group photo. I didn't flinch. I smiled too, but something in me slid quiet and sharp into place. We were in the quad at her university, surrounded by families cheering, hugging, crying. I remember the smell of sunblock and cut grass, the echo of Lena's name still fresh from the ceremony, the pride in her eyes when she saw us in the crowd. Grant had waited until the applause had faded, until the attention had moved on, to drop his bomb like it was an afterthought. I turned to him. My smile didn't change, my eyes didn't blink. I have something for you too, I said. From the inside of my purse, I pulled out a brown envelope. Nothing fancy, unmarked, just a single fold and a little weight. I handed it to him. He raised an eyebrow. What's this? You should probably open it before you go shaking hands with everyone. Grant stepped aside and tore the flap open, still holding that smug look. It didn't last. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the attached document. I watched the muscles in his face shift, watched the composure crack just enough for me to see the man underneath, the one who had gotten too comfortable, too confident that I'd stay small and quiet like I always had. His voice caught. You've been planning this. I tilted my head. No, you have. Then he looked around and realized people were watching, that Lena was watching, that the photographers from her college were standing 10 feet away with their lenses lifted. Are you serious right now? He hissed. You're the one who brought secrets to graduation, I said. I just brought receipts. He crumpled the envelope and shoved it in his jacket pocket, red blooming across his face. His jaw clenched, then unclenched like he was chewing the rage instead of spitting it. Lena called to us from across the lawn. Mom, Dad, pictures with my friends. Grant turned toward her, voice like nothing had happened, but I saw it, the storm behind his eyes, the panic barely veiled behind performance. I'll be right there, I said. He walked ahead, stiff and smiling, while I stood still for one long second. Then I exhaled and followed, heels clicking across the sidewalk with the certainty of a woman who had already packed her escape long before the fire started. Back at the house after the photos and the clapping and the drive home, I sat on the edge of the bed and took off my earrings one by one. My phone buzzed. One new message, Grant. We're going to talk about this. You blindsided me. This isn't how decent people act. I stared at the screen and smiled to myself, a kind of smile that had taken me years to earn, because I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged, I hadn't even flinched. But for the first time in a very long time, he had. Have you ever smiled through something that should have broken you? The next morning, the sun broke through the curtains like it hadn't watched the world shift the night before. I stood in the kitchen alone, stirring a pot of water for tea that I never drank. The quiet felt too tight, too controlled, like a room holding its breath. Grant had left for campus earlier than usual. No note, no text, just the leftover creases on his side of the bed and the echo of a slammed bathroom drawer. Good. That meant I had the house to myself. I padded down the hallway and opened the door to our shared home office, a place I hadn't claimed in years. It used to be mine before I traded my investment clients for playdates and PTA meetings. Now it was his papers, his books, his curated image of thoughtful academia. Everything was arranged with the illusion of warmth, just like him. I walked past his shelf and opened the back closet. Tucked on the top rack was an old accordion folder, navy blue, faded edges, labeled in my handwriting, Carter Family Finance Legacy Plan. It had been up there for a decade. He'd forgotten about it. I hadn't. I placed it on the desk and opened it slowly, like lifting a lid off a memory. Inside were copies of our home deed, insurance policies, beneficiary forms, old investment accounts that had never been closed, and, most importantly, the original operating agreement for a consulting business I had registered in my name before Lena was born. Technically, it still existed. Dormant, inactive, but never dissolved. I slid the folder to the side and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Across the top, I wrote one word, exit. 4 months earlier, I hadn't been planning a revenge. I was planning an escape. The day I found the email wasn't even dramatic. He left his inbox open on the family desktop. Not because he was sloppy, but because he didn't think I was paying attention. He wasn't careful with me anymore. The subject line read, "You were amazing last night." The sender, Maya Lowell. The name hit my chest with a pressure I didn't have words for. She had been my assistant. I had trained her. I had helped her rewrite her resume after her divorce. I had written her a letter of recommendation when she wanted to move into academia. Now she was thanking my husband for the kind of night that made her write a 2 a.m. email with no punctuation and too many exclamation points. I didn't print the email. I didn't forward it to myself. I just memorized the timestamp, then walked upstairs and folded a load of laundry like nothing had happened. That's when I started the list. Passwords I reset, documents I scanned, inquiries I made. Every task became part of a quiet operation. I paid a third-party auditor to discreetly review our household accounts and investments. The first red flag: transfers to a property fund registered under a business I didn't recognize. L&M Research, LC. The M was obvious, but the L? It didn't take long to realize what it stood for. Lowell. They were building a life while I was making sure the guest sheets were clean. Weeks passed. I smiled at Lena. I made dinner. I answered emails for the alumni council I still sat on. But each night I added to the exit file a scanned copy of my original consulting LLC, an updated will naming Lena as the sole beneficiary of my personal retirement account, an appointment confirmation with a real estate attorney to begin separating property entitlements. And finally, 3 weeks before graduation, I met with Marsha Landon, my former mentor, and still one of the most lethal divorce attorneys in the state. She didn't ask many questions. She just looked at the email I showed her and said, "You're not here to cry. You're here to reclaim." I nodded. "He'll leave me. I just want to leave first." Marsha leaned back, steepling her fingers. "Then let's write the ending before he writes the plot." The night before Lena's graduation, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have. My hands hovered above my makeup bag, not to apply anything, but to remind myself I didn't need to paint over the woman who had survived 4 months of silence with clarity. Grant came in without knocking, adjusted his cufflinks, and said, "You look nice." I looked at him through the reflection. "So do you," he smirked. "You're being weird." I smiled softly. "You'll understand it soon." Back in the present, I finished reviewing the last section of the exit file and slid it back into its folder. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and began writing a resignation letter. Not for a job, but for a role I no longer intended to play. What would you do if you knew they were going to break your heart and you had time to prepare for it? Maya's name didn't just burn, it echoed. There's a kind of betrayal that comes from strangers. It stings, then fades. But when it comes from someone you once sheltered, someone you once fed at your own table, trained at your own desk, comforted after she cried over a man she claimed destroyed her life, that betrayal does not fade. It calcifies. 2 weeks after I discovered the email, I saw her name again, this time in a faculty newsletter Lena forwarded me, the kind she always annotated with exclamation marks and emojis in an effort to keep me feeling looped in. At the bottom of the announcement, under the new Visiting Fellows section, was a name I hadn't expected to see. Maya Lowell, guest lecturer, gender and identity in leadership. I stared at it for a full minute, not because it surprised me anymore, but because the irony was almost too rich to swallow. She'd taken the same slot I had turned down years ago, back when Grant encouraged me to stay focused on Lena's early years, back when he convinced me that one steady job was better than 2 overbooked parents. I'd stepped back to make room. Now Maya had stepped in and was calling it her stage. I looked at the date of her appointment and did the math. She had started 6 weeks before I found the email, which meant they weren't just sleeping together. They were building something. That Friday, I went to a panel talk on campus. It wasn't one Lena was involved in, but it was open to the public, and Maya was listed as one of the speakers. I didn't RSVP. I just walked in, sat in the second to last row, and listened. The topic was power dynamics in professional partnerships. The moment Maya began to speak, I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. She wore the same shade of lipstick I had once recommended to her, back when she thought self-confidence could be applied with a brush. She spoke smoothly, carefully. The room leaned into her. I watched her praise the value of female mentorship, mention unnamed women who made space for her in male-dominated rooms. I was one of those women, and I wasn't unnamed. I just wasn't invited to stay. After the panel, I lingered near the refreshment table, pretending to study a poster on sustainable pedagogy. She spotted me before I moved. "Celeste," she said, all lightness and surprise. "Wow, I didn't expect— What a lovely surprise." I turned. Maya. Her smile was calculated, but her eyes flickered just for a moment. She hadn't expected to see me like this, polished, calm, fully aware. "I didn't know you were back on campus," she said quickly. "Are you involved in anything right now?" "Oh, just observing," I said. "I like to keep an eye on institutions that recycle my ideas." She blinked. I let the pause stretch before adding, "You speak well, your pacing's improved. Do you still keep that little timer in your pocket?" The mask cracked. No, I just rehearse more now." "Good," I nodded. "Consistency is everything when you're repeating someone else's material." There it was. The shift. Her voice dropped half a register. "Celeste, I don't know what you think you know." "I know enough." I stepped closer, not threatening, not loud, just enough to make it clear this wasn't a social visit. "I was kind to you once, when you were crying in my office about your marriage, when you couldn't afford lunch and I paid quietly, when I vouched for you at 3 board meetings, even when you weren't fully prepared." Maya swallowed hard. "That was a different time." "Exactly," I said. "And your version of gratitude is sleeping with my husband." She flinched, but I didn't wait for her to answer. Instead, I handed her a small white envelope. Inside was a color printout. A screenshot, actually, of the email she sent to Grant. Not the first one, but the fourth. The one with her work signature at the bottom, from her university address. "You may want to remind yourself," I said, "of which inboxes belong to you and which don't." "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm warning you, because there's a difference between ruining a marriage and ruining a reputation. I may forgive one, I won't protect the other." I left before she could follow. That night I emailed Marcia. Subject line: "Update. Third-party exposure confirmed." She replied within 10 minutes. "Good. That'll help with leverage. Stay quiet. Stay steady. Let the dominoes fall." I closed my laptop and went to check on Lena. She was in her room, sprawled on her bed, headphones in, watching a documentary on migration patterns and sketching notes into a tattered journal. She didn't look up. I leaned against the doorframe, studying her. For a moment I wondered what would happen when she knew the truth about her father, about Maya, about me. Would she be angry? Would she take sides? Would she see me as the woman who let herself get walked on, or the one who finally stepped away? Maybe none of it. Maybe she'd just realize that a mother can break and rebuild in the same breath and still offer love like nothing was missing. Grant didn't come home the night after the panel. No text, no call, just silence. I didn't ask where he was. I didn't need to. I'd already traced one of the fund transfers from his secondary account to a hotel in Asheville, booked under L&M Management Inc. The receipt had been emailed to our shared backup account by mistake. I archived it without a word, let him keep pretending, let him think he still had the upper hand. The next morning, I found a handwritten note on the kitchen island, folded neatly, almost performative in its effort to appear personal. "Celeste, we need to talk like adults. I've invited my mother and Ken to join us for dinner tonight. Let's stop turning this into a war zone." Grant. A war zone. He was the one who dropped the bomb on our daughter's graduation day, and now he wanted to host a ceasefire like he hadn't scorched the ground himself. Still, I said yes, because sometimes letting someone believe they're calling the meeting only makes it easier to end the show on your own terms. Dinner was a fiction from the moment the doorbell rang. I set the table, cloth napkins, polished silver. I made roast chicken, though no one had asked. I even lit the candles, not because I wanted to play house, but because I wanted them to remember what it looked like when a woman who'd held everything together finally let go with grace. Grant arrived first, hair styled tighter than usual. His mother followed 10 minutes later, wearing that perfume she thought covered judgment. And then came Ken, Grant's older brother, the one who always stayed quiet at holidays but watched everything with the flat expression of someone taking mental notes. We ate in short, pointless bursts. No one mentioned Maya. No one mentioned Lena. After dessert, Grant cleared his throat. "I think we all know why we're here," he began. I sipped my wine. His mother chimed in, soft but cold. "Celeste, whatever's happened, airing things in public is beneath you. It's not just embarrassing, it's reckless." Grant added, "What happened at graduation was not the problem," I interrupted. It was the first time I stopped hiding it. His jaw twitched. "You humiliated me." "No," I said, folding my napkin slowly. "You did that yourself. I just let the light in." Grant's mother leaned in, voice low. "This doesn't help, Lena, this kind of drama." is the result of her father lying to his wife and daughter for nearly a year, I finished. Let's not confuse exposure with cause. Ken finally spoke. So you've already spoken to a lawyer? I met his gaze. Months ago. Grant slammed his palm on the table. The silverware jumped. You planned this. I prepared for this, I said. Big difference. His voice dropped to a snarl. So what now? You take half the house, the car, a sob story online, and leave me with what? A ruined name? Your name was never ruined by me, I said. You did that when you started signing receipts for hotel rooms and calling it business. Ken shifted uncomfortably. Even his mother sat back quiet for the first time, but I wasn't done. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, a list of asset transfers, timestamps, a copy of the property title now solely in my name, and a signed confirmation of Grant's voluntary removal from our joint investment portfolio. His signature captured digitally when he'd approved what he thought was a refinance proposal. He stared down at the paper. You tricked me. No, I said. You stopped reading fine print when you stopped seeing me as someone who read it. His mother stood up, shaking her head. This is vengeance. No, I said. This is a boundary. Later that night, Lena came home from visiting a friend. I was still at the kitchen table, the last glass of wine untouched. She walked in, dropped her bag, and gave me a strange look. Why does the house feel off? I smiled faintly. It's just quieter. She stepped forward. Did something happen? Yes, I said, but you're not the one who has to fix it. She tilted her head. Is this about Dad? I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked, Lena, what would you do if someone broke something important over and over, but told you to keep pretending it was fine? She frowned. I'd stop pretending. Exactly, I whispered. What happens when the person who kept your world intact finally puts herself at the center of it? Lena didn't ask questions that night, but I could feel them gathering behind her eyes. She lingered longer in the kitchen, watched me make tea I didn't drink, sat in the living room scrolling through her phone, not really scrolling, just present in a way she hadn't been before. By morning the stillness had shifted again, not sharp like a fracture, quieter, like a door that had always been slightly ajar finally beginning to close. Later that afternoon, I found her in the garage, elbows deep in storage bins she hadn't opened in years. She was surrounded by childhood paintings, old school projects, a box of glitter-glued cards labeled for Mom, and a stack of photo albums. When she saw me, she looked guilty. Not caught, just exposed. Looking for anything in particular? I asked. She didn't look up right away, just said, No, I don't know. I wanted to see how we used to be. How we used to look or how we used to be. That got her attention. She sat back on her heels. Is it true? About Dad? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over, picked up the album from her lap, and opened to a photo of Grant with Lena on his shoulders at the state fair. I remembered that day. It rained an hour later. I'd been the one holding the umbrella over both of them. But I wasn't in the photo. None of them. I ran a hand down the edge of the page. Some people take up more space in pictures than they do in real life. Lena looked at me, expression clouded. I mean, yeah, she said softly. He was always loud, but he also showed up. Even if it was just for show, he showed up. That's what makes it harder to untangle, I said, when someone performs love well enough that even you start to doubt the difference. She blinked quickly like she was holding something back. Why didn't you tell me? About the affair? About Maya? Because I didn't want you to hate him. I don't, she whispered, but I don't recognize him either. That evening, she knocked gently on my bedroom door. I was reading a deposition summary from Marcia. Nothing urgent, just preparatory material for what would become a very quiet but very final financial meeting. Can I show you something? Lena asked. She held up her laptop. On the screen was a photo from the graduation ceremony, one of the official ones from the university's website. Grant, arm draped around her, beaming. Me, 2 feet away, hands folded, my smile polite, controlled. You weren't in any of the pictures I posted, she said quietly. That's all right. It's not. I think I didn't even notice, or maybe I did, and I didn't care because I was so focused on him being proud. I set the file aside. I spent my whole life chasing his approval, she continued. And now I'm realizing I never really asked what yours looked like, or what it cost you. She closed the laptop and sat beside me. I want to know. I want to understand what I didn't see before. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. But I felt something shift again. this time in the space between us, the start of something new, built on something real. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Lena drafting an email on her laptop. She looked up, hesitated. "I'm writing to decline the graduate offer from Greenridge." I froze. "Why?" "I want to stay local for now. There's a program at Hallowell that focuses on public narrative and women's studies. I think I want to work on stories like yours, stories people don't notice until the silence breaks." I shook my head slowly. "You don't have to stay for me." She smiled. "I'm not staying for you. I'm staying because I'm finally seeing myself." That night, after Lena went to bed, I opened a folder I hadn't touched since the day I'd filed the initial petition. Inside was a printed email Maya had sent to the university's board months ago, a request to create a new lecture series titled Women Who Lead Through Sacrifice. My name wasn't listed in her proposal, but 2 quotes, word for word, were mine, from a keynote speech I had written for a seminar she attended as my assistant 5 years earlier. She hadn't just taken my husband, she'd taken my voice. I closed the folder, and I opened a new one. What's worse, being erased from the photo or realizing you were never meant to be in the frame? 3 weeks passed before I saw Grant again, not by accident, not by choice. It was a mediation session, our final one, at Marsha's downtown office. Neutral ground, no home court advantage, just papers, deadlines, and silence heavy enough to press into your skin. He arrived 10 minutes late, carrying that same worn briefcase he used to bring to every university function. He looked tired, not outwardly disheveled, but something in his face had slipped. The careful composure he always wore had started to fray at the edges. Maya wasn't with him. Marcia had told me she'd withdrawn from the public fellowship panel 2 weeks ago, just after a quiet but thorough ethics inquiry had opened at the university. Screenshots, emails, time-stamped messages sent from her official address. Someone had submitted everything anonymously. I didn't ask who, I didn't need to. He sat across from me without greeting, just a terse nod and a shallow exhale. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the draft settlement from his folder. "I've reviewed the revised proposal," he said, voice clipped. "It's steep." Marcia remained composed. "It's equitable. I'm not giving up the downtown property. That was mine before the marriage." "It was paid off using community funds," she replied. "Celeste has documentation. Shall I review it again?" He turned to me, eyes flat. "You've been waiting for this." "No," I said calmly. "I've just stopped waiting for you." His fingers tightened. "You turned this into a performance." I looked at him, really looked. The man who once stood at the center of every dinner party, who'd spoken at conferences like his voice filled the air with gold. The man who'd whispered at our daughter's graduation that he was leaving me, as if I'd been an accessory to outgrow. "No," I said. "You did that. I simply stopped writing your lines." He fell quiet, and for the first time in months, I saw something like defeat flicker in his expression. Marcia pushed the final page toward him. "Sign where indicated, or we move to court." He stared at the pen, then signed. Not like a man making peace, like a man who knew he'd lost something he'd never truly understood. That evening, I walked through our old house one last time. Not ours anymore, really. Just a property about to hit the market. The realtor was waiting out front, clipboard in hand. "It's a lovely space," she said cheerfully. "Should sell fast." I smiled politely. It held a lot. Inside, the rooms were stripped bare. Empty walls, clean counters. I stood in the kitchen, the same one where I used to bake pies from scratch for holidays I was barely thanked for, and slid open the drawer near the sink. I left a note, just a square of paper taped inside the drawer. "Don't disappear inside someone else's idea of home." Then I closed the door, handed over the keys, and walked away. The apartment I moved into was smaller, quieter, just 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, and a balcony that caught the afternoon light in a way the old house never did. It didn't creak, it didn't remember anything. It was mine. I unpacked slowly, box by box. I found old cookbooks I hadn't opened in years, mugs with chipped rims I couldn't throw out, and a card Lena had made when she was 7. "Thank you for making the house smell like safety." I pinned it to the fridge, not out of nostalgia, but because it still felt true. That night I made cinnamon bread just for me. No guests, no audience. I turned on music barefoot in the kitchen, and for the first time in 2 decades, I didn't feel like I had to earn the space I stood in. I just belonged. Lena graduated again, this time from her master's program. She wore deep green robes, eyes sharper than before. She walked differently now, not like someone trying to be seen, but like someone who knew she already was. During her speech, she said, "Sometimes the strongest people aren't the loudest. Sometimes they rebuild quietly while holding everyone else up. I know this because I watched it happen. This degree belongs to the woman who taught me that silence is not weakness. Thank you, Mom." The applause came hard and fast, but I didn't hear it. All I heard was the sentence I'd waited a lifetime to feel, and I let it land, like a stone dropped in still water, rippling in all directions. 2 weeks later, Grant texted, "Would you meet me for coffee? Just to talk." I said yes, not because I needed closure, but because I wanted the space between us to be defined by choice, not by avoidance. The cafe was warm, full of mid-morning sun and half-listened conversations. I sat near the window. He arrived in a navy pullover, still wearing the same watch I'd given him 10 anniversaries ago. He looked older, but not in a tragic way, just more ordinary. "I'm not here to change your mind," he said. "Good," I replied. He paused. "I lost more than I thought I would." "You lost what you never really valued," I said. "That's different." He nodded. "I'm sorry." I believed he meant it. I just didn't need it. He looked down at his cup. "Would you ever consider—" "No," I said softly. "This isn't war, Grant. It's distance, and I've learned to value that." He didn't argue. He didn't ask again. We stood. We didn't hug. And then we walked in opposite directions. The idea came one night while Lena and I sat on my balcony drinking cheap wine and talking about everything and nothing. "A workshop," I said. "Just a small thing, maybe once a week, helping women understand their finances post-divorce, taxes, credit, retirement, nothing flashy, just tools." Within a month, we had over 30 sign-ups. Within 2, we had to move locations. And week by week, I watched other women step out of shadows they didn't realize they'd lived in. I didn't teach them to fight. I taught them to keep the lights on for themselves. Now I wake up with windows open. I bake things that don't need to impress. I read books from the middle because I no longer care about starting in the right place. I drink coffee slowly. I take long walks. I laugh harder than I used to. Some nights I sit at the same kitchen table, a tart cooling beside me, music humming low in the background. The silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels earned. Sometimes freedom doesn't sound like breaking glass or slamming doors. It sounds like your own footsteps, walking away from the noise. Sometimes walking away quietly is the loudest thing you'll ever do. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing the ones that always led me back to pain. If this story reminds you of a moment you had to reclaim your peace, I'd love to hear it. What does freedom look like to you now? If this video touched your heart, let me know where you're watching from or what part stayed with you. And if you're still finding your voice, stay, listen, and when you're ready, speak. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that honor quiet strength and real healing.